As I said, Donald Trump is, as we speak, about to join Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki for a private chat for an hour or two. Just translate as president, no advisors. And this comes after Trump's barnstorming tour of Europe and then Britain, where he was met by the Queen, but apparently insulted, snubbed by both Prince Charles and Prince William. A personal friend of Donald Trump is Nigel Farage, the former UKIP leader and European Parliament MP who fought for decades to get Britain out of the European Union and thought it succeeded when the British voted yes to the Brexit vote. And Farage then rubbed it in at the European Parliament.
When I came here 17 years ago and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
Farage's victory inspired Donald Trump, who got Farage to campaign for him and later said Britain should make him its next ambassador to the United States. Nigel Farage joined me from London a short while ago, ahead of his September tour of Australia. I'll have some details of that later. Nigel Farage, thank you so much indeed for your time again. Lovely to have you back on the show. Can you tell me, what did you make of reports of Prince Charles and Prince William, the next two heads of state, refusing to meet Donald Trump?
Well, Prince Charles has a very different worldview to the President. Prince Charles and I have clashed in the past. Prince Charles is a very political royal. I hope that on the day he becomes king, he drops all of that.
Yeah, well, good luck on that one. Why is there such a hatred of Donald Trump that tens of thousands of protesters filled London when only dozens of people, by my account, protested against the state visit of a real dictator, Chinese dictator Xi Jinping?
Oh, yes, and many other Arab heads of state who've been here where they, women aren't even second-class citizens. There are lots of public executions. People get their hands cut off, but no one protests about that. No, it's Donald Trump. Now, look, I'm a friend of Donald Trump's. I like Donald Trump. I admire Donald Trump. But even I would accept his New Yorker brash approach to life is something that some of the sort of softer middle classes find difficult to take. But what was interesting was when you actually looked at who was protesting. These people who talk about diversity all the time, well, they were nearly all middle and middle upper class. They had names like Jocasta and Sebastian. Mummy and Daddy were comfortably off. None of them work. I mean, frankly, it was a howl of outrage from those who want to show their virtue to the outside world, and I really wouldn't take it too seriously.
You're quite right about Donald Trump's sort of property developer, New York style, in-your-face kind of thing. But what do you think the protesters actually do not get about Donald Trump?
Well, they've got it into their head that this is some awful, misogynistic, racist, homophobe. I mean, you could just, a list as long as your arm. What they don't see is that he's the first leader, major leader in the Western world for many years who is trying in office to put in place all the promises he made during the campaign. He's re-establishing people's faith in democracy. And so many of the criticisms about border policy, about migrant policy, refugee policy, so many of those policies were actually put in place by President Obama. And yet when Obama came here 2 years ago to tell us how we should vote in the referendum, no one protested at all. And that is the ultimate hypocrisy.
Absolutely, and I've listed a few at the top of the show, a few more as well. What sort of shape do you think Donald Trump is in now politically? He says he's interested in running for re-election as president in a couple of years. Do you think he'd win again?
Yeah. Well, look, the midterms coming up in November are absolutely crucial. I mean, they're almost of themselves like a re-election. If Trump was to lose, the House, the Senate, then there'd no doubt be endless procedures to try and impeach him or goodness knows what. So November is a very, very important moment for him. He, according to polls, he is more popular with Republican voters at this stage than even Ronald Reagan was during his first term. The American economy is now growing at 3.5%. There are some that think that this year it could even reach 4%. And You know, when the economy is good and when you've got a pro-business president who's cut taxes, I think he's in pretty good shape.
What is it about him that made you and him good friends? What do you see in him that you respond to so much? He's very un-British in his style. What made your heart go pitter-pat?
Oh, yes. Well, I think it worked both ways. You know, he saw my rather long and lonely struggle against the UK establishment, which culminated in the Brexit vote back in June 2016. And Trump's instincts and mine on the big stuff are very similar, namely these false supranational globalist structures like the European Union are not forces for good. They're actually undemocratic and really rather bad for people because they just work with the giant multinationals to the detriment of everybody else. Trump believes in the nation state, as I do, as being the building block that we owe our allegiance to, that we want to pay our taxes to. And also, on this vexed question of immigration, you know, I honestly don't think that many Australians can really understand the huge changes to the social fabric of many of our cities in Europe that have occurred over the course of the last 10 years. And wanting to control immigration sensibly, yeah, the left decry he was being racist. Actually, it's just common sense. So on the really big stuff, I very much saw eye to eye with him. And, you know, I was very pleased during the campaign to share a stage with him and to campaign for him.
Now, I'm going to want to switch to the British election and the British political scene and your tour here in a second. But just to finish with Trump, he's going to have this meeting with Putin within a few minutes. People are saying, well, you know, Trump is so naive and Putin is so cunning, or maybe Putin's got something over Trump with this Russian collusion stuff. That he'll give something away, is so keen on a deal. Do you have any fears about any of that? Do you think that Putin can play Trump and that Trump just doesn't know enough and isn't well briefed enough for these meetings?
From big developments on Fifth Avenue to New York, all the way through to sitting down with Kim Jong-un, all the way through Trump's career, he's been underestimated. They don't see him as being a metropolitan, university-educated. You know, he's not one of us, is what so many of the commentariats say, so they make the false assumption that he's stupid. He's not stupid. I know him. He's very, very street smart. Now, look, if relations between the Russian leader and the leader of the Western world are better after this summit, what on earth is not to like about that? I mean, it's almost the ultimate sanity test. However, I think Trump will have to ask him some tough questions about Russian interference and say, you are not welcome to do this.
Absolutely, with, of course, Special Investigator Robert Mueller just indicting 12 Russian officers for hacking into the Democratic Party emails, although good luck in trying to extradite them to face a trial. But switching to British politics...
Although, to be fair...
Yep.
Sorry, but to be fair, you know, what we've discovered is that 12 Russian spies were spying. I mean, you know, we do it to other countries. We all spy on each other. It's the way the world works.
Oh, heavens no. I thought MI6 was just there to provide characters for James Bond movies, but you shocked me, Nigel. I mean, I just must be
right.
So naive. But British politics, I mean, Donald Trump did say that British Prime Minister Theresa May was not delivering the exit from Europe that the British had voted for. Now, I reckon Trump is right, and I wonder whether you, because we've just played at the top of the show your telling the European Parliament that they'd laughed at you for 2 decades and you'd succeeded. But have you succeeded? Do you now feel betrayed by Theresa May's plan?
Quite extraordinary that we had the earthquake of Brexit, and yet the day after the earthquake, power was handed back to the very same people we'd fought against in the referendum. We've got a Remainer as Prime Minister. She doesn't believe in Brexit. She's tried through this process to keep both of her wings of her party on side. And you know something? If you try and please everyone, you generally finish up pleasing no one. And I am now convinced of one thing. If she stays as our Prime Minister, we will not get the Brexit we voted for. So, frankly, unless the Tory party want to suffer a cataclysmic loss of public trust, they need to get rid of her and replace her with somebody else.
Who's that somebody else? Four ministers have quit, including Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. Trump said that he would be a great Prime Minister. Do you agree?
Well, do you know, Boris came very late to the Brexit party, but he did come to the Brexit party. And ever since that referendum, he's consistently said, all we need is the self-confidence to believe that we can be a self-governing nation, not run from Brussels. He would be miles better than Mrs May. That's not to say there aren't other people that could do it, but I can see a situation here in which Brexit gets betrayed and we effectively don't properly leave the European Union. It's called Brino here, Brexit in name only. And we get Brexit in name only and Jeremy Corbyn next time round. So something radical needs to happen, and quickly.
When you rose to prominence, Nigel Farage, as a UKIP leader, etc., years ago, a lot of things you were saying were damned as racist and what have you. But what's happening now in Europe? Because we've seen the barriers to illegal immigration finally going up in Italy and Poland and, of course, before them, Hungary. We've seen the full-face niqab now banned or restricted in France and Austria, Holland, Belgium, Denmark, 3 or 4 other countries as well. Is this the rise of Nazi right-wing racism, as many of the media suggests, or something else?
No, it's a reaction against the huge follies that have been made by our politicians. And, you know, first it was Brexit, then it was Trump. Now we've had in Italy, you know, 2 parties who 5 or 6 years ago were nowhere, and they're now commanding in the polls 60% of support, and that in a multi-party system. Be in no doubt, immigration, culture, identity is totally reshaping European politics, and I think much of the establishment have frankly got their head in the sands. They don't see what's happening. I firmly believe that the global revolution that started back in 2016 is continuing. In fact, I predict you ain't seen nothing yet.
What is your ideal as to where this all will lead to, Nigel? I mean, nationalism has had a dirty word. It's too quickly associated with fascism and racism and all that. But what is your dream of where Europe should be at?
Well, the European Union, I want to see the back of. You know, it is a project that attempts to take away from the ancient nations of Europe their identity, their democracy, their self-determination. You know, it doesn't work, and people are now rebelling seriously against it. I am not anti-European. I've worked for French companies. I've drunk Spanish wine. You know, my kids speak German. I'm not anti-European at all. I would like to see a Europe of nation states, trading, cooperating closely together, but without any political or global ambitions. That is what I want to see, and I really do believe that a vast majority of people across Europe would prefer that model too, and that's why, you know, I haven't just fought for Brexit, I've campaigned all over Europe for the last decade and more to try and spread this message, and I'm pleased to say it is spreading.
And one of the things the protesters hate about Donald Trump, of course, is that he's made the US walk out of the Paris Agreement for richer countries to cut the emissions blame for global warming, while China and India, of course, increase their own. Now, our own former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, says that Australia should also walk out of Paris. What do you make of this whole climate agreement, in fact, the whole global warming scare?
Well, you know, the global warming argument, I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not qualified to comment on whether carbon dioxide is the great evil or not. I just don't know. But as with all of these things, whenever you see a global consensus with big money behind it, I tell you what, it pays to be a little bit sceptical. And the point Trump's making is that Americans get a very bad deal out of this because they're penalised heavily, while other countries like China are not. And again, it's part of this mentality. The new wave of politicians are going to start putting the interests of their own countries and their own voters first. And I'd be surprised if there weren't many in Australia who didn't feel the same way.
Too right. You're going to be touring Australia in early September. What's tempted you to come out here, and what do you hope to achieve?
Well, I want to come and talk about the globalist revolution, how it happened, why it happened, and my role in it, which was, you know, I was in this game way before the revolution started. So if you like, you can kind of blame it all on me. I want to talk about that phenomenon. I want to talk about what's going on in the Western world. And I want to point out that no country is immune from this. You know, if the ruling classes in Australia and the big businesses in Australia get themselves too distanced from ordinary people, hey, it could happen there too.
Nigel Farage, look forward to seeing you here in a few weeks' time. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Nigel Farage will be touring all around Australia in the first week or so of September, taking questions from the audience. If you want to be part of it, go to nigelive.com.au, nigelive, one word, .com.au for ticket details. After the break, a threat to jail, a Catholic school leader who criticised the Turnbull government.